Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, Jennifer and I are going to talk about toxic masculinity. That's kind of a hot button topic and has been for a while, probably. I think even before the term came into being, it's been a topic. It's just people weren't calling it that. What the term now refers to is the notion that some people's idea of quote unquote manliness perpetuates domination, homophobia, and aggression. This idea that men need to act tough and avoid showing all emotions can be harmful to their mental health and can have serious consequences for society, which is how it became known as toxic masculinity. Now, that is just one definition. All the definitions are somewhat similar and have very similar through lines, but the basic idea of it is that masculine behavior is that men don't cry, they're stoic, they don't show any emotions, they're the aggressors. Yeah, aggressive. It can lead to like violence and showing no emotion and, basically all those things, right? Like all of the sort of negative stereotypes that we all can think of when we think about the bad side of masculinity. So yeah, it's this idea that feelings are a female thing.
You mean emotions? Emotions are a female thing and men don't have emotions. Women are way too emotional. You mean that?
Yes. So basically it has led to a bunch of quote unquote, and yes, I am quoting from an article, which I will link to, emotionally stunted men who are unable to forge intimate relationships with other men.
Okay, well, I think that's a really interesting spot that you brought up that right away. Unable to form intimate friendships with men. That's what you said, right?
Yep.
I read that earlier today too, and I thought, it's way bigger than that. Every single man I ever dated thought the word intimate meant sex. They didn't understand that the word intimate has a much more subtle meaning about showing your true self and fully being with another human being. Doesn't have to be sexual at all. Could be a very intimate sexual experience, but also could be a very intimate emotional experience, but also could be a very intimate conversation. And I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, love to hear from some men on this. I don't think most men know that intimacy doesn't equal sex. So how can they have an intimate relationship with a male friend if they think that that means sexual? Because God forbid you wouldn't want to mistake them for being gay.
Right. Yeah, God forbid. Nobody wants that. Oh my God.
But I think that is a really big point. I have tried in my relationships to talk about that, to say, hey, intimacy doesn't equal sex. And I don't feel like they get it. And maybe I'm wrong. Again, I don't know every man in the world, but I don't think they get it.
They really don't. And, like, have you ever, I know I've been friends with guys who they have their buddies, right? And you go, well, what's your buddy's favorite color?
They don't know.
They don't know. Or what's your buddy's birthday?
They don't know that.
Or they go, well, my girlfriend takes care of all that stuff. She knows all that. Well, dude, it's your friend. Why don't you know? Right? Like, just that's one of the examples.
Yeah, I was told that that's because male friendships are different than female friendships, and that men don't talk about that kind of stuff. They don't talk about that. And I'm like, well, what do you talk about? And basically it was like women and sports and maybe food.
Yeah.
And granted, I know that that's not completely true. I get that. I mean, there are a lot of other things that are going on, but there definitely is a difference in female friendships for the most part and male friendships.
Right. Well, but I think it's part of what we've talked about this kind of before, or at least alluded to it, is that it goes back to that society, at least here in in Western society, maybe, other societies might be different, but whatever, men and women are treated differently. And that goes even as far back as when we're babies. Like little boys and little girls are treated differently. In fact, the differences in emotional displays between boys and girls are relatively small and not always in a stereotypical fashion. So essentially, little boys and little girls feel in very similar ways, and they emote in very similar ways. Society then imposes stereotypes and ideas on them so that little boys act this way, little girls act that way.
I think that's true to some extent, but I don't think it's completely true. And I'll tell you, this is all from my own personal experience. I have no science behind this. I'm not an expert, but I'll tell you a little bit about our family and some of the things I've noticed. So I agree with you. Very young children, boy, girl, throws a temper tantrum, whatever. But for years, my dad and me and my children and my brother and his wife and their children went to Cancun together. And the girls and I took the upstairs and the boys and their family took the downstairs. And the girls and I would be quietly doing whatever we're doing. And when the boys would come in, the two little boys, who are not little boys anymore, they're teenagers, but when they would come into the room, it was like a tornado hit. And it's their energy was just so much different than our energy. Like within minutes, there'd be a fight and somebody pushed somebody off the edge of the bed, and it wasn't the girls that were pushing somebody off the bed. It was one of the boys hitting the other boy and getting in trouble. And then their dad getting mad and their dad coming up and yelling at them. And then, it just, and the girls and I talked about it a lot of times, and we love them. We love having them there and we love spending time with them. I'm not saying, but we often talked about how different their physical energy was than our physical energy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I fully agree with that statement. I do think. Well,
it does say relatively small, right? Like it doesn't say it's non-existent. The differences are there.
I mean, that energy of those boys was like, whew.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Hitting, pushing, kicking, stomping.
Yeah. By that age though, had they already been influenced in a certain way that girls act this way, boys act that way? Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that y'all did it on purpose, right? Because we're framed by society too. We only do what we know, right? And so maybe that's part of it.
I think it definitely is part of it, because I will say this: I didn't allow the pushing, shoving, jumping, kicking in my house because my brother and I had a very volatile relationship, and we basically beat the crap out of each other. And I refused to let my kids do that. I was like, we don't roughhouse like that, because roughhousing always turned into a fight where somebody hit somebody, got mad, and people got hurt. And so I might have been a little bit of a control freak, and we didn't even wrestle and tickle at my house.
Yeah.
I don't like to be tickled because my brother used to torture me with that. So yeah, maybe there is a difference in the fact that I didn't allow my kids to partake in that.
Right. That could be.
It could be. But those boys have some energy.
Oh yeah. Well, I think, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't have kids, I think most little kids have an abundance of energy.
I mean, my girls, they're not phonetic like that, and they don't. And they sit down and they read a book, and they read a book for hours, or they work on an art project and they will draw for hours on end. It's a different, I don't know. I'm gonna debate people. I think there's some biological differences, but again, but they could be trained. I don't know.
Right. Well, but when it comes to emotion though, and I think that's what toxic masculinity is focusing on.
Boys were just as emotional as my kids when one got hit and one got hurt and one was crying and one was fighting and one was like, they were mad.
Right. And that's what the quote is referring to as emotional displays, right?
Oh yeah. There was emotion all over the place.
Yeah. And so
okay. All right. You win.
Fact of Yeah, I would. But I think what the research and the articles and all these things are getting at is the effect that toxic masculinity has, and the effect that it has on men and women is going to be slightly different, obviously, right?
I agree with that.
For instance, the effect on men is that they don't fully express their emotions. So all this gets bottled up inside. They don't know how to address it because they aren't taught, right? Because, growing up, they aren't taught how to deal with their emotions. It's,
No, they're told,
push
suck
this
it
down,
up.
push this down, right?
Suck it
And
up.
then, and they're, so they don't know how to deal with it. They don't talk about it because that's seen as girly. And so they don't know how to cope with it. They don't talk to their friends because, well, you aren't going to talk to another guy about how you're feeling because you don't talk to anybody about how you're feeling. And so then you become isolated and you have all this stuff that you don't know how to deal with.
But do you think that that is a thing of the past? Because I mean, okay, I have my brother. Because I have my brother and my sister-in-law who have 2 boys, and I feel like they've worked really hard to talk, to teach their boys how to talk, to teach their family how to talk and to communicate. And I feel like, okay, their energy is different than ours, but they're still talking to one another.
Right. Well, and I think that's awesome that you bring up that there's an example that is going against what we normally see as sort of, and of course, like you said, I mean, there's going to be variations, and this is not be all end all of everything.
Probably a lot of families are doing it different now.
I hope so.
I feel like I know a lot of parents who are doing it differently. I mean, not that it's a lesson in perfection by any means,
right.
But I think, when you and I have talked about me raising my kids and my ex-husband and the things that we do and how I think a lot of parents are trying to do conscious parenting and really looking at the ways that they were raised and is this really right? And so I guess what I'm proposing is, yes, there probably is toxic masculinity out there, but maybe parents who are really working on conscious parenting, and there are lots of mothers of just boys, like they have families full of boys and they are really consciously paying attention to the message that they're giving those boys.
Right. So
wrong about this or
no, I definitely think you're right. I mean, especially if you're seeing this,
I feel like I'm seeing
life,
I feel like I'm seeing it, but I don't know if the little kind of hippie atmosphere we live in Ann Arbor is the exception, or is that
I think it might be. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I wish
the rest
I
live in a bubble.
Like that. Maybe a tiny bit, but it's not a bad bubble. It's not a bad bubble. For instance, I know parents on either side of this, right? Like I know one woman who has a young son, and I can tell that she's making an effort to raise him in a way that he uses his words and that he talks about things with. I also see boys who are growing up who are being raised by women that I know, people that I know, and I can tell you 100% that those boys are not being raised with the idea of be in touch with your emotions, be able to name your feelings, be able to talk about them, work through here coping skills.
Okay.
Like, and okay. I can't really say what, well, I mean, I could probably generalize and make a stereotype, but I see both ends of the spectrum, just even in our age group with people who are raising boys.
Okay. But here, all right, all that stuff you just said, I'm a woman who was born in 1969 and raised in the 70s, 80s. I was not raised to be in touch with my feelings and talk about my feelings. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is this whole detachment from our own needs and this detachment from our feelings, especially those that are deemed bad, which I want to talk about in another episode. Why is anger bad? Anger could be seen as, I'm angry because my needs are not being met, or someone's violating my needs, and I am feeling anger, and this is my cue to tell me that my treatment is not right.
Right.
So is that really a bad emotion? Okay, I know I'm getting us off topic, but what I'm saying is, why is it toxic masculinity if I was raised in the same way? Like maybe I have toxic femininity?
No, well, here's the thing, and here's how I'll address that, is because we were raised in a society that was masculine was the dominant, and yes, it's still mostly that way. We were raised in the dominant, right? And so the whole idea of, we didn't grow up with certain coping skills because nobody did, right? And so, but we were still raised in a certain normative way of girls act a certain way and are allowed to be emotional, boys are not, right? So in that sense, we were still raised according to norms that were set by according to the masculine definition of what men should be like and what women should be like.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, and I agree with you.
Yes, so we didn't grow up necessarily with the coping skills and the whatever, but there's all this like self-help stuff and meditation and yoga and therapy and all that, and the vast majority of practitioners of all of those things and consumers of all the self-help and all those things, the vast majority are women. So it's seen as okay for women to work on self-help and to read the books and to, to go to therapy and to go to yoga and to journal and all of this. But if a guy is seen as doing these things, he's seen as being either feminine or effeminate, or he's acting gay, or he's seen as being weak. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah. And I also, when you were describing all that, it occurred to me, okay, I do see the difference, because I, as a young child, I was allowed to cry. I was allowed to be sad. I was allowed to have that type of emotion, but I wasn't allowed to be aggressive or angry in my emotion, which are all our emotions, right? So aggressive or angry for me is bad.
Right.
But sad and crying, although my brother Randy he just like terrorized me. He would call me cry baby, you always get what you want, cry baby. Which,
oh no,
I mean, you had a brother too. Did he terrorize you?
But he's younger than me. So he didn't terrorize me.
Well, mine did. Okay. All right. Good points. I see where you're going. There are a lot of people out there. I watched a lot of YouTube videos with Gabby about this, working up for this topic. And there are a lot of videos out there that say toxic masculinity is a scam. That's not real. Those are buzzwords. They don't mean anything. What do you say to that?
Well, what I would say is, okay, maybe it is a buzz phrase, right? Maybe. The phrase is basically just shorthand to convey an idea. I think it's incumbent upon people to look at what idea is behind the phrase, right? Look at what's behind the shorthand, because the shorthand is there so that every article that's written about toxic masculinity doesn't have to reinvent the wheel every single time.
Gotcha.
There's some assumption that you know what they're talking about, or if you don't know, that you're going to do a little bit of research, that they're not basically spoon feeding you. They're assuming that you're going to do, at least this is how I read it. And if I were writing, I would do it this way. I would assume that you would do some work to inform yourself a little bit, even just a tiny bit, right? So yes, it is a catchphrase. I get that. And I understand that people are annoyed with catchphrases, but they serve a purpose. And the reason why toxic is used, in my opinion, and so I'm sort of, taking some of this from what I've been reading. The word toxic is used because the result of this is this sort of hyper masculine, hyper aggressive, hyper in some ways violent nature of the world to anything that is different, right? So violence in the workplace, violence in homes, rape culture, seeing women as objects. Basically, just a woman is just a sexual being that is to be used as for a man's purpose, right? Mm-hmm. Or what was the other idea that was in my head? Or the idea that anything that is different, anything that is not the stereotype, anything that is not quote unquote the norm, the heteronormative, is different and thus wrong and thus weak and not of value. So that's where the toxic part comes in, because it's basically devaluing anything that's different. And it's so it, and all of the lots of aggression can come along with it, with, yes, rape culture, any sort of violence towards women. And if you want to, and toward other men, or to, to trans people from other cultures, or people with disabilities, there's all this violence toward it. And it may not even, it doesn't even have to be physical violence. You can be violent towards somebody in other ways. You can make somebody feel ashamed. You can make somebody feel less than. You can make an environment not welcoming to someone. I think one way that people can sometimes think of it is the whole sort of, and nothing against frat boys, I've dated my share of frat boys. I am a sorority girl. I get it. I had a whole lot of fun. So, and I'm sure there will be days when I will date yet another frat boy. So it's not against all frats and Greek culture.
You're going to date a young frat boy? You cougar.
Girl. Woo. Yep. What? Yeah. So as long as he's age appropriate, but I'm okay with him being younger. But anyway, so it's that whole idea of like the worst of frat boy nature. Mm-hmm. That's another maybe shorthand for toxic masculinity.
Do you feel that toxic masculinity has affected your life? What are some examples of how?
One way that it has affected me, and I thought about this when I was reading this, and one of the articles actually talks about this, about how it can come about in, or kind of it can manifest in relationships, mm-hmm. where the guy basically, like, his girlfriend or his wife is his one and only, that's it, everything, she is the conduit and she is the vessel for all of it. Mm-hmm. Meaning he doesn't talk to anyone else, like, mm-hmm. really, I mean, of any import, like he has, his guy friends and whatever, but
he doesn't share or get intimate with them.
Exactly. And so mm-hmm. I was in a very long relationship with a man who he exhibited all of this. He had a lot of, actually, I think everybody should go to therapy, but this particular man had a lot that he should have been in therapy for. And I'm not being awful. I'm just being objective.
We're all there.
Well, yeah. And so he wouldn't talk to anybody else. He had very few male friends, or any friends, really.
So he always did this dump on you.
He would always dump on me. He had very few friends outside of our relationship. So it was basically just me. Whereas I'm a very social person and I have lots and lots of friends, and I would do stuff with people outside of our relationship. And so that was always upsetting for him. I was the only person he would talk to when anything happens. when he was upset about anything. I was the only person he expressed any anger to. I was the only person he did anything with, really. And so I became everything to him. Yeah. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I've had other relationships like this too, where I was the only person that that particular man turned to.
So it's a pattern for you.
Oh God. Yes. Well, shit. I got to talk to my therapist about that.
We'll talk about that another day.
That's another episode.
Right.
Oh God. Like I said, we were together for years, and it got to a point where I wanted him to get help. I wanted him to go to therapy. Mm-hmm. And he would, first of all, it was like pulling teeth to get him to even consider the idea. Then he finally did go, and I think he only went like maybe once or twice. It was really hard on my part, because he would say things that made me fear for him and whether or not he would hurt himself. And I got to a point where I told him, I said, I can't deal with this all by myself. Mm-hmm. I need you to get help. And then our relationship got to a point where we were having issues as a couple. And I thought, I love this man. I don't want to just walk away. And who would I be if I just walk away from an issue or a problem or relationship with a person that I love without trying to work it out? And so I said, I think we should get counseling as a couple. And his response was, you find the therapist, you pay for it, you schedule all the appointments, and then I'll go. And I was like, what? Wait, what? This is for both of us.
And so you equate that to toxic masculinity. Why?
Because, and I'm going to link to the article, because they talk about this in better detail than I am going to, and that'll be a lot more clear than what I think I'm doing right now. Therapy is seen as weak. So, and it's seen as something that women do. So the woman should handle it.
Because men have been taught to reject these things they see as feminine, which is gentleness, sensitivity, self-help.
Asking for help.
Okay, I get it. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I was kind of drowning there and not describing that very well.
No, I was just seeking clarity for my own understanding.
No, and thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it. I think men, well, I'm also guilty of this, but I think this is probably a stereotype that we see often, that not only do men not seek out therapy, but they don't often take care of themselves medically as well, because that's seen as weak. Mm-hmm. I also do the same thing, so I'm not going to call anybody else out on that. Right. Yeah. For me, I think the way it has played out is in my own home. Mm. I have a job I love. I have children. I manage things. I take care of shit. I'm good at what I do. Yeah. When I get into a relationship, oftentimes it is suggested to me, wouldn't I rather someone take care of me? Wouldn't I rather be a stay-at-home mom? Wouldn't I rather? And I think to myself, okay, some of that sounds really nice, right? Yeah, it sounds great. But no, if I would have rathered that, that's what I would have done. And I have nothing but high praise for stay-at-home moms who take care of their kids and their house and their husband. And that's a lot of unpaid labor and hard work. And when they're conscious parenting and doing it well, nothing but hats off to those people. Mm-hmm. I did not want to do it that way.
Right.
I just didn't want to. I like going to work. It's like, it's social to me. I found a job that plays on my hobbies, I guess you could say. And I love what I do. Although, some days like any other job is a drag, but most of the time I love my job. And so my thing is, I seem to draw in also a pattern, men who think that I should give it all up to be the wife and and the majority of them, to be for real, I make more money than they do. So what are they doing taking care of me? Like, I don't know. I think I have toxic femininity. I do. I just call myself out here because I I appreciate the sentiment. Like, I appreciate the idea of a man wanting to take care of a female, and I appreciate the niceties and stuff like that, but I don't actually need someone to take care of me. I don't need it.
You know what I think it is? I think that there's a happy medium, right? I think there is, because it shouldn't be that you do everything yourself or you give everything up so that somebody else can do everything.
Yeah,
I think
I'm not really good with that balance.
Yeah, I think there's something in between there, you know.
Right.
And sometimes, look, I am incredibly single right now, so I don't know if I can really talk.
Join the club.
Man, I've read these things. And people who are better at relationships than me say that these things exist.
Yeah. Okay. I was just going to ask you that. This is a little off topic, but I kind of feel like it's still kind of on topic. Can a truly feminist woman actually have a relationship with a man?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think being a feminist woman involves making your own choices, being able to be true to yourself because you have those choices, and wanting to enable other women to have the choices so that they can be true to themselves. Right?
Oh my God. You just hit on something so big.
Yeah.
The cure to toxic masculinity, I'm going to have to practice saying that because that's tough for me. The cure to toxic masculinity is for men to be free to be themselves. And you're just saying that that's feminism.
Yes. Yes.
Men, you need feminism.
Yes. We all do.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? It all goes back to our episode about voice and being able to be true to who you are and say that. If you're a man who wants to have intimacy or intimate friendships with other men, I think a lot of men want that in their core.
I do too. I agree with. I think so many men
want that
are
connection,
starved for that, but they don't know how to do it.
And they don't know how to say that they want it because that is seen as weak.
Yes. And so one of the articles that I'm going to link to talks about men forming groups and keeping them small and having a hard and fast rule about what happens in group stays in group, and being very specific about the reason for the group is to help men get in touch with who they really are and learn how to express it and to feel comfortable with that and to be able to build friendships and relationships with other men and to develop deeper friendships with each other.
And imagine that if they're doing that, they're learning self-love. They're learning to really love and put their true selves out there to be vulnerable. Vulnerable, by the way, men, is not a weakness. It's a strength to truly be vulnerable, which I'm not super good at either. So I'm right there with you all. And then self-love to the love of your friendships, to the love of your children, and how to better love your current partner.
Exactly. Or a new partner.
And also possibly your relationships at work become deeper and more developed.
Yeah.
So it's really a win-win.
Exactly. And I can say for sure that I know at least one man who is involved in a group. Well, I'm just saying, like, one for sure that I know absolutely does this, who is involved in a group that it's all men, and it's for something else, but he talks about the friendships that have grown out of that group because they allow themselves to be vulnerable and open with each other. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Do you think, okay, take out toxic from toxic masculinity. Masculinity itself. Is there something wrong with being masculine?
No, no. And I will put it this way. We all have, and this is men and women, everybody, wherever you fall on the gender spectrum or gender identity or wherever you fall, everyone has feminine energy and masculine energy. The way that those energies within you manifest and are expressed and where they show up and how they show up and how those balance or don't balance, that basically is an expression of who you are. That is your personality.
So you can be masculine or present dominantly masculine without being toxic.
Yes, that is absolutely possible. And I mean, I hope that we can all think of at least one. I mean, maybe all of us can't, but I mean, I know I can think of men who are, I mean, they're lovely men. They're masculine. They're, you know, some of them are guys, or even not just guys, but whatever, whether they're gay, straight, whatever. But there's also a side of them. And this is maybe something that I love about them, that there is a side to them that can express their feelings and can be vulnerable with other people. And I see the deep relationships that these men have. And there's a warmth to them, I think, that draws people in. I don't know, it just makes them more receptive, I think.
Yeah. I think the reason people hate this term, the reason I ask you that question is I think people hate this term toxic masculinity because they think that what everyone is saying is to be masculine is to be bad or to be wrong, or that there's something inherently wrong with men and masculinity. And I also think, and I've been pondering this question for many years, I think it would be very difficult to be a man right now in this current culture, having people screaming about toxic masculinity, and to know how to be a man, like to know, because think from my own perspective, I guess, if I were a man, I would think if I act in a certain way, maybe people will think I'm being too aggressive, or if I show some femininity, then maybe people don't think I'm masculine. And as women's roles have changed, how do men's roles change also? And I think a lot of those men don't want those roles to change, but also I think some of them do, but they don't have any good role modeling for it. Like, what does it look like to be a strong, assertive, empathetic, feeling, beautiful man in today's culture? What does that look like without the toxic? I think they don't know.
I get that. It's hard to imagine something that you can't see.
Right. And where do we have very great examples of it?
Yeah. But the thing that I wish I could think of some examples right off the top of my head, but there are some. But what I would like to posit to people is that gives you the creativity and the ability to define it for yourself. If you don't see it, if you don't see that role model out there, then try to find it. Do whatever reading you need to do, or, you know, look to other cultures if you have to, but it gives you an opportunity to figure it out for yourself. You're not looking for somebody else to define it for you.
Flip the shoe. If someone told you how to be, you didn't know, you didn't have a good example, how are you supposed to be the proper woman right now? You're supposed to have a career and babies and a husband. And
well, I would just say that I have to just be true to myself. I think another way to look at it,
this is tough,
and maybe
a very unfair question to pose to you.
No. I think it's fine. And the way that I would turn it back is, and I hope this is on point and not going like completely off the rails, is say for like growing up, I didn't know any Black divers. I had never seen any Black divers before. So if I'd just gone with, well, I don't see any, so I can't be it, then I never would have been a diver. But I was interested in it. I tried it. Nobody was telling me I couldn't do it. So I did it, and I liked it, and I loved it. So I did what was true to me, right? Or say, for instance, before Arthur Ashe, as a Black tennis player, there weren't any male Black tennis players. There was a woman, Althea Gibson, I think is her name. But before her, there were no, at least nationally known or internationally known, Black tennis players. So
you're telling these men to be trailblazers.
Yeah. You be true to you. And if you don't know what that means, take some time to figure it out. Or try different things.
It's taken me like 50 years to figure out.
Well, and that's okay. But that's okay. People are still trying.
Slow learner. You're about to call me a slow learner. You're about to say,
no, I was not.
You're a slow learner, Jennifer. I heard it. So you're saying if they do the work, they can undo toxic masculinity.
Yes.
It involves being true to themselves. And what about, how do they, because I think a lot of it is like this, it's just like what we were talking about body positivity.
Yeah.
I think toxic masculinity is all the stuff that men hear from each other, from social media, so they're hearing these messages. Don't they also have to reprogram the messages somehow? Or what
Yes.
I do with my priority board and constantly going back to it and making sure I'm on priority and like correcting my self-talk. And doesn't there have to be some action behind it too?
Absolutely. Like I said, the men's groups, or reading the books, or you know what, if go into a bookstore or order a book, and if you're like, oh, somebody's going to see me buy this book, or somebody's going to see me read this book, well, you know what, how gangster are you that you're like, I don't care what other people think, I'm gonna read what I want, I'm gonna go in this self-help section and buy that book? Be brave, do it, get in there, buy the book.
Not everybody's brave, and that's why we have some of these situations.
Well, but in this age of technology, there are ways that people can still be brave,
so they
and
can
not be seen.
Reading privately.
Yeah, they can order the book on Amazon and have it shipped to their house. They can read it on, a Kindle app, so nobody has to see what they're reading. It's fine. Like, there are ways that
capitalism
people avail themselves of this knowledge. There's ways to do these things.
Can masculinity be redeemed?
Of course. Because there's so many good things about masculinity. I mean, just like there's good things about femininity. I mean, there's good things about being a human. Sometimes you want somebody who is, and women exhibit this too, you want somebody to be strong for you, masculine.
Okay, take out toxic masculinity again, and then think of, in our world, in our feminist world, what the role model male looks like. What are the characteristics for a man to aspire? This is just your opinion and my opinion. I know we're not experts. What would be those things that you would be looking for? Not necessarily someone to date, but just to be an example of masculinity, modern masculinity, to raise our modern boys. What does that look like? What could that male look like?
A man who is not afraid of his non-aggressive emotions, a man who's not afraid of his joy, who's not afraid of his sadness,
who can feel those things, not necessarily not afraid, but a man who feels his joy,
who will actually let himself feel these things
and express it,
and even express it. And if they have a little boy, teach their son how to do the same, right? That it's okay to have emotions, because we all have big emotions sometimes. And with little, I mean, it's as scary as big emotions can be for us, they've got to be frightening and just earth-shattering for little kids. So you teach them that it's okay to have big emotions, but here's how you can feel your way through them. And it's okay to express them, and teach girls the same thing. Like, it's okay to have these big emotions, and sometimes big emotions include anger, and it's okay to express them, but express them in a way that doesn't hurt other people. Whether it's a big positive emotion or a big negative emotion. So
see, I'm going to take those two words out of emotions. I don't think there's negative or positive. There's emotions.
Right. Exactly. So that's why I was trying to say aggressive.
But we do as a society, we look at them as bad emotions and good emotions. And I'm voting that we change that rhetoric and we move away from them. Emotions are a barometer of what's going on in our lives.
Yes.
If we sat with them, acknowledged them, felt them, walked through or walked with them, then maybe they wouldn't be so big and so scary.
Yes.
And maybe they would just be, again, back to anger. Maybe it would just be an alert that, hey, someone is not treating me properly, and my body and my emotional sense is telling me that. So now I can take the action to stop whatever this person is doing. I don't know. I'm making this up. I'm making this up as I go.
Yeah. No, but that makes sense. And so not just how to feel and express things for yourself, whether you're, again, we're talking about men. So as a man, but also how you treat other people.
Does a masculine man have to be big and strong and muscular and tall? And
no, not at all.
That doesn't describe masculinity to you?
Not necessarily. I mean, I know plenty of guys who, I think we all do, who don't fit the stereotype of, I don't know, like the Marlboro man or the,
Dude, that dude is killing himself with cigarettes. What kind of man is that?
Well, yeah, okay, so
right, okay, totally toxic masculinity.
Or like, isn't like some, I don't know, big burly whatever dude, right? Like masculinity can be expressed in lots and lots of different ways.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to look a certain way.
You know how dudes always say the most attractive woman is a woman who's comfortable in her own skin. You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe this could be said for attractive masculine man. That masculinity is a man who is comfortable in his own skin. Who has come to terms with who he is and how he feels and his empathy for others. And this man is comfortable with his masculinity, and therefore his masculinity is secure.
Yes.
And that is not toxic masculinity.
Yes. And in that security can express empathy and other emotions, but feel secure enough in himself that he's like, I'm a fully actualized human being, so I have these emotions. Boom. That's what I think.
Boom.
Yeah.
Masculine men are attractive. Toxically masculine men are not. And I think the whole argument out there is men think that when we say we want to take away the toxic masculinity, that they think we want to take away their masculinity, and we actually want them to self-actualize in their masculinity, whatever that mouthful was.
Yes, that is it exactly. Yes. And I think that is the quote that we use when we...
Why? Because we love men.
Yes. Well, there's a movie, and I quote this all the time, and it's so crazy. I can't even remember half of the rest of the movie, but I think it's called, shit, I'm gonna forget the name of the movie. But there's a line in the movie where the woman says, she's talking to her husband, and I guess he's being a butthead or whatever, and she goes, I love you, but I love you too much to let you stay the way you are. Like she wants him to be better, right?
That's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down when you're trying to change the person that you're with, but we'll leave it at that today.
That's a whole other, bundle of therapy.
Yeah. Changing our loved ones.
Yeah. Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot. So.
Well, this was a good discussion. Did you have more that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
One thing that I did want to talk about, and then we can wrap up. We were talking about, what do we do now? These men are already here. What do we do? And so we talk about, okay, little boys who are growing up here being raised. I don't have children at all. You're a mother of daughters. Mm-hmm. So what do we do? What can we do to help with society in general, trying to help society be a better place for fully actualized men and little boys?
I mean, that's a really great question, because I think we kind of all struggle a little bit right now with what do we do. The things that come to mind are the same sort of leadership principles that always come to mind for me, which is envision it. Envision it, because what you can see in your mind becomes your beliefs. And then your beliefs, they lead to your words. Your words and your actions, they help influence other people's beliefs. And then that system grows. It's the belief action cycle. And I believe firmly in it. The other thing I can say is, just sitting down and watching the YouTube videos on toxic masculinity today with my daughter was enlightening, because I feel like she actually knows way more about the subject than I do. Clear that these are things that young people don't accept anymore. Like they don't accept the gender roles, and they don't accept the gender conformity. And she told me a story about boys wanting to paint their fingernails in the high school, and a group of boys, they wear nail polish in their masculinity, want to wear nail polish. And then there's a whole nother group of boys that think that's just ridiculous. And it's like the clothing thing and the expression of yourself. And I think that truly masculine is if you want to wear nail polish and you wear it and you feel comfortable, wear it. And we had a long discussion about that today, which is really interesting. Maybe, again, like everything else we do, Raquel, is opening up the discussion so that people can talk about it, so we can debate out these ideas. And so people that think that toxic masculinity is that we want everyone to be feminine, we find out that that's not true. That's it's all these, it's like the people who think that feminists hate men.
Yeah.
It's not true. It's a fallacy. And the more we say it out loud, perhaps we can change hearts and minds, and perhaps not. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you 100%. And the way that I sort of think about how this would play out in my own life is, I have lots of friends who have kids of varying ages, and I like to think that if their children wanted to talk about this sort of thing, but didn't necessarily want to talk to their parents about it, that I would hope that they would feel comfortable enough to come to me, or that their parents would feel comfortable enough to go, hey, here are other people that are not us that you can talk to about things if you want. Like, I know my mom did that for me when I was growing up. And there were, for instance, when I was like, oh, I don't want to go to church with you anymore, my mom was like, well, if you want to explore other religions, I have friends that you can go with. I will talk to them, that sort of thing. So if my friends' kids, their sons or their daughters, want to talk to me about things that they maybe don't feel comfortable talking to their parents about, or they just want a different viewpoint, I want to be one of those people. I want to be someone that these other kids can look to as another resource. So that's how I would see that I could manifest helping to bring forth the type of society that we are hoping for.
My guess is that many men and boys are craving this as well.
So what I would like, I know we have some male listeners, guys that are listening, share this with your guy friends. Women who are listening, because I think maybe the majority of our listeners are probably women. Women, share this with the men in your lives. Share your sons, your friends, your husband, your boyfriend, whoever, your dad. Same with guys. Share it with everybody. Listen to it together and then talk about it. Read the articles that we're going to link to in the show notes. Watch the YouTube videos that we're going to link to in the show notes. and then talk about it. I think that's a way that we can help other people have these discussions.
Right on.
Right on.
All right. Bye, Raquel.
Bye, Jennifer. Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.